I'm Chris Williams from Cyclone Fanatic and a proud Iowa State graduate from the class of 2007. No one shows up like Iowa State fans.
And Cyclones support Cyclones on and off the field.
Your gift can provide scholarships to students, fund groundbreaking research. We could even drum up opportunities for the marching-band. Visit MoveWhatMatters.com to learn how you can make an impact today.
All right, welcome in to another edition of Kickin' It. We're recording this a little bit later in the week, but we got Ari Temkin from Big 12 Radio on TuneIn, and he is at Big 12 spring meetings right now, and we figured that would be a good person to get with all the stuff that happened in the country. So we are, like I said, we normally record on Mondays, comes out on Tuesdays. This recording Thursdays. I believe this will come out still today, so probably a Thursday release. Anyway,
Friday release.
Friday release.
Happy
it's a Friday
Friday.
release. Hey, happy Friday,
Rebecca
everybody.
Black. She says you gotta get down on Friday.
That's a throwback. 2005. Anyway, I'm Jeff Woody. I'm here with Grant Mahoney, Aiden Wyatt. You heard chip in with the actual correct date because he's a producer. He does all the things that actually make the show happen. We are brought to you as always by Kelderman Manufacturing, Kelderman.com. They got a fun YouTube channel if you want to go check out the Kelderman Manufacturing YouTube channel. We did have a relatively long interview, and we record these intros after the interview, so we know how much time we have. But as a newly recurring segment, we do have to keep up with the what did Jeff miss in social media over the last 6 to 7 days. I don't think anything, right?
Well, I'm gonna coin this this segment. Don't be a dork, eat your pork. I'm not saying you're a dork because you don't know what's going on, because obviously you have a life and social media is not life. But sometimes I
Don't
say
be a
these
dork,
things.
eat your pork.
Yeah, sometimes I say some things like, "Oh, really?" I'm like, well, yep, kind of a dork. Just kidding. I love you, Jeff.
It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Okay, so and this week in what Jeff missed in social media, so John Halliburton, obviously Tyrese's dad.
Yep, watch that game. Yep.
But if you saw, he got suspended for getting in Giannis's face. He was suspended for 6 weeks, so he was watching games from home, and the Pacers said he can come back and watch games, but he needs home games, but he needs to be in a booth. So he's back, starting Game 4, which is the last game on Tuesday. Tyrese would have a triple-double. Not only did he have a triple-double, he had no turnovers.
He was first player in NBA history to have 30 points, 15 assists, 10 rebounds, no turnovers. First person in NBA history in the playoffs to ever do that. I watched that game. Wild.
Yeah. So there's the Tyrese piece. Sticking with the Iowa State theme, Alan Lazard got engaged. I reached out to him to see if he wanted to join the show, and he was obviously busy. And with all due respect to my wife, I did not know that girls were made this. I didn't know girls were constructed this wonderfully. She was Miss Peru Universe of 2023. So
good for him.
Yeah. So she's the second most beautiful girl in the world behind my wife. And then kind of a feel-good story here. And I heard of this actually on Murphy and Andy, but I was going to talk about it anyways. There's this guy from Oregon who was recently diagnosed with a medical condition called Klippel-Feil syndrome. That's a spinal disorder where he's basically got a loose spine. He could eventually become paralyzed from the neck down. And after receiving that news, his outlook on his life shifted, and he grew to despise his job. He worked at Discount Tire. So he quit his job pretty quick, liquidated his 401k, bought a sailboat with the goal of sailing around the world alone with his cat. He taught himself how to sail and how to do maintenance on his boat from YouTube over the course of a year. And over the course of a year, he learned to sail. So he set sail for Hawaii about a month ago and made it there in 24 days. They had a nice welcome party for him at the yacht club once he did arrive. And I think I'd seen him say that his next stop is going to be the French Polynesian. And those of you who, you can see it, Aiden's got up here. His handle on Instagram is Sailing with Phoenix. Phoenix is the name of his cat. His name is Oliver. He seems like a really nice fella too. Last I checked, he had 1.9 million followers, but I did look at him last week and he did not have that many. So kind of a feel-good story, but just a really genuine dude and really admirable. I mean, the dude realized his life could literally shift overnight. He talks about this in one of the videos, his imminent death, because we all die at some point, was very shocking. He realized, you know what? I don't like what I'm doing. I'm going to go sail the world. It's terrifying, but also like awesome. How many people can say that they sail the world?
That's cool.
Cat? Yeah.
That is very cool. Those are good things. Thank you for bringing those ones and not some slang term that I'm supposed to understand,
Well,
but don't understand.
I did have one more, but Aiden said maybe not. So we left that one out.
Okay, well, if generally that's the thing that like you and Aiden, you make a joke that was online that Aiden gets and giggles, and I'm just straight over my head.
Nope,
Usually that's what happens.
It wasn't that. It was a picture of Tyrese Halliburton that's been floating around. Anybody who's on social media will know what I'm talking about. That's all I'm gonna say.
I'm good. All right. We do got to get to Ari Temkin. He is at Big 12 at Big 12 spring meetings. It's not media days. Big 12 spring meetings. Lots happening. So without further ado, Ari Temkin. And now we're going to welcome in Ari Temkin, a recurring guest. He is the host of Big 12 Sports on TuneIn. I think you are the most recurring guest that we have. So thank you for agreeing to show up and deal with us again.
Easily my greatest accomplishment in life. Easily my greatest accomplishment in life.
Well, you're a Kansas grad, so the bar is pretty low. So one of the reasons we want to have you on, other than just kind of talking to other people in around the nation, just getting a sense for it, is you are currently, if those that are watching on the video feed or getting a video clip of this, is over your right shoulder, there's Big 12 conference meetings. So you are currently down in Orlando at the Big 12 spring meetings, which have become a lot more interesting. Like, for those that aren't super aware of what Big 12 meetings are, usually this is sort of like they're going to present the rule changes, they're going to present anything else that's going to have to happen. But with the House settlement being where it is, with Greg Sankey saying all the Greg Sankey things that he said, this Big 12 spring meetings have become a lot more interesting. Has it felt that way when you've been down there, that it's just this is a little bit of a different ballgame than it normally is?
Yeah, no question. I mean, and obviously so much of that is based on the pressure, as you just alluded to, and what's going on in Destin with the SEC, because it's almost like you're trying to be reactive to everything that they're saying. And you want to focus on what's happening in your own house, but it's hard not to pay attention to what's happening across the street at that house. That house is much bigger, and they're adding another addition to that house. And so you have to pay attention to what's happening. But yeah, I mean, I think you're the nail on the head. Like, these spring meetings were a formality for years, and now it's become instrumental for them to be here and strategize and figure out what they're aligned on. And yeah, so I mean, yesterday was the men's and women's basketball coaches. Today it's the football coaches. So basically behind me down a hallway is this huge auditorium where you've got basically every school in the Big 12 represented with their athletic director, school chancellors, football coaches that are discussing everything for hours on end with the football coaches. And part of this is us presenting what we're offering in terms of TuneIn and Big 12 radio to try to be like, hey, we're here, we want to have you on as much as possible, and, try to be more accessible. So yeah, there's a lot here. They have student athletes that are here that are meeting with administrators, chancellors, giving their feedback. We're on the campus of Disney as well, so you get a lot of kids. So it's, yeah. But the student athlete component is really interesting. I mean, I would argue that eventually they're going to have to collectively bargain with the student athletes, but now they're sort of collectively bargaining without really legally doing that.
Yeah, I think has Yormark come out? I guess I haven't paid as much attention to it. Has Yormark come out and directly addressed, because catch people up on what Sankey had said in the SEC media days. You're talking about they're over in Destin, which of course the SEC is in Destin, of course. But what the SEC had said in Big 12 media days.
Kenny Dillingham.
Oh yeah, Kenny. Hey Kenny, I love the way you approach your coaching. By the way, big fan.
Isn't he the coolest? Guys, he's the coolest.
Big fan. I just, as a total side note, for those that are on audio only, Kenny Dillingham just walked over his left shoulder in between things, and the way that Kenny, just little mini, I don't know if you can hear it from here, but the way where if a guy isn't going to be playing and he wants to transfer out, like shopping his kid out and saying, I really like this kid, let's find the best situation for him. Every coach should do that, and just, I don't know, just little love letter to Kenny.
I mean, also, like, with injuries, he's like midweek, like, yeah, this guy's not going to play this week. Like, what? You're not supposed to do that.
That's great.
He's amazing.
He needs to get his voice in shape, though, for the end of the year, because that thing was gone by the time we got to December. It was gone. Anyway, so Greg Sankey at Big 12 Media Days at SEC Media Days essentially says, I want to drive the bus and you don't tell me what to do, right? I mean, more or less, that's what he was going for, right?
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, basically the back and forth is the Big 12 came out and basically talked about, this is what we believe based on the good of the game. And we're looking out for the best interest of the game, which the implication was the SEC is not. There's a whole side discussion on, should the SEC and the Big 12 be looking out for the good of the game or for themselves? Like, I think that's a legitimate discussion, and I could see both sides to it. But Greg Sankey is what he's trying to do is not be a villain in a role of a villain. He's trying to come off like he's not who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's trying to hedge on being the villain, despite the fact that he's clearly the villain in this situation and is viewed that way. I mean, not even Tony Petitti is like his lapdog at this point. We just think about the SEC and the Big Ten as doing things together, and it's really just the mouth of Greg Sankey. Mm-hmm. So, there's a discussion to be had about, does it get to a breaking point where if you're the Big 12 or the ACC, you're like, you know what, go hold your own playoff. Big 10 and SEC, do your thing. And I wonder, if you call their bluff that way. But ultimately, we've spent so much time this week and at these meetings talking about 4-4-2-2-1 or 5+11, which sounds just ridiculous. Just to be considerably talking about that, and then you're thinking through the math. To me, it doesn't even matter. Give them 4 guaranteed spots every year. Give them 1 guaranteed spot every year. They're still going to end up with 4 or 5 bids, right? So, we know this. The Big 12 has never gotten the credit, will always get snubbed, and maybe a situation in which they're guaranteed 2 bids is better, because I guarantee you the average of the Big 12 bids over the next decade probably not going to be higher than 2, and we might be less than 2, might be 1.5, right? So it almost seems like a better situation for the Big 12 to get those 2 bids, but they keep talking about trying to prove it on the field, and I get that. I agree, but we've seen this already. We've seen Oklahoma State get snubbed. We've seen Baylor get snubbed. We've seen Iowa State get snubbed. We see these teams that have gotten snubbed consistently from the committee. So to me, it's it doesn't matter. It's the same committee. It's the same prerogative. It's the same power that the SEC and the Big Ten have.
Yeah, it is interesting though this is a slightly off track thing, and for those that are not in this world, so the CrossFit Games used to be a thing that was a huge deal, and I think it is still to some extent a good thing, but there's been a lot of direction that's changed, and I'm a CrossFit gym owner. I've been doing it since 2014, and the reason why I'm kind of making this connection, one of the reasons why the viewership of it has fallen off, and one of the reasons why participation has fallen off, has been that every single year, the qualifying process to get to the CrossFit Games is different. Sometimes it's an in-person competition. Sometimes it's online. Sometimes it's online and in-person. Sometimes it's 4 levels. Sometimes it's 2 levels. And so you start going the hell, I don't just keep it the same for a year or 2. And I think one of the things that they're potentially running into, and I feel like it is always not seeing the forest through the trees in this situation, where Greg Sankey wants more and more and more, because it is in his incentive as the SEC commissioner to position his group more and more and more and more. But then you change one year after the next, and now we go from 12, and we're going to stay 12 one time next year, and then we're going to go up to 16, but then we're going to go 16 to a different thing, and then we go 16 to a different thing to a different thing. Totally. And you can't evaluate the teams because you're evaluating the situation. That let's say you were to keep the same 12 teams next year, and the SEC does next year what it did this year, which is shit the bed. You can't say, it's really weird to be trying to bargain from a position of power when all of your teams get run out of the board, even though you got all of them in. And when that happens, you go, all right, that was just 1 year. It's a flash in the pan. Well, we're going to change things again. And then we're going to change things again. And to me, it feels like part of the frustration, I would imagine that at least on the other side of Greg Sankey, is that stop it. Let the process run for a second to see how this goes before we start changing it and claiming that you have more than you have. And I feel like that, to me, from my perspective, is it just feels like there's, I don't want to say too much change too fast, but we don't even know if it's good. It's just, we're just changing for the sake of change.
Yeah. I mean, literally, next year's playoff is going to be different than last year's based on the straight seeding. And then the year after will be a 16-team field, I would imagine. So, yeah, I mean, 3 straight years of completely new rules in terms of the playoff. And it's, is the straight seeding probably the right move? Probably. The Big 12 is not going to get a bye now. under the straight seeding situation unless they go undefeated. It's just going to be too difficult for them from the perception game. So yeah, I mean, it's insane, and it's super reactive in a world that's like, you can just do this every year based on the outcome of the playoffs in terms of like changing because, this didn't work or that didn't work. And the other thing that I think is really important to not lose sight of is it's like, we're really talking about like 5 teams here. The SEC and the Big Ten stand on the shoulders of these great, these giants, but it's Georgia, it's Michigan, it's Ohio State, it's Bama, but who knows if that's going to last. It's Texas, right? It's LSU. But I mean, you're literally looking at 6 teams that have won national championships in the last 11 years. 6. And like,
if you go back further, it's not that the list doesn't grow that much.
Right. And it's Clemson, it's Ohio State, it's Michigan, it's Bama, it's Georgia. And who am I missing? One more, right? LSU. Those are the 6 teams that have won playoff. So like, and I expect those 6 teams for the most part to be competing for the next 11 championships. Maybe it's not Clemson. Maybe, Kenny Dillingham built something like he's talked about at Oregon that, he's recruiting at a consistent level. And I mean, that's the big thing too, right? The blue chip ratio. I mean, the Big 12's at a major disadvantage because, they don't have a program that's recruiting at that level. Maybe it's eventually Dillingham or somebody's, Dion could be there. But I don't know if it's necessarily a predictive metric, but obviously if you pay attention to that stuff, like no team has won a title having less than 50% of the roster be 4 or 5-star recruits. Like, Iowa State's never going to be built that way. Matt Campbell, consistently talks about, a developmental program, and that's reaped a ton of benefits, but does it mean that they can't win a national championship? I think what Texas Tech is trying to do this year could buck a trend like that, right? Because that's just not how you've built championship caliber teams. Do they have to win a title to justify it, or do they have to win a Big 12 championship and maybe win a playoff game? But to this long-winded answer, I think to your point about like constantly changing and adapt, like they're always working in terms of, justifying the SEC getting multiple bids. It's like the machine is always justifying, and then the opposite is true for the Big 12. TCU winning a playoff game did more damage than had they lost a game to Michigan because they got smoked by Georgia. But the fact that people don't even remember that they beat Michigan, a team that went undefeated the next year and won a national championship, like it's insane. Michigan gets more credit for losing to TCU than TCU gets for beating them in a playoff game. I mean, think about Texas and OU dominated this conference in football and never won a playoff game in the Big 12. The first team to win a Big 12 playoff game was TCU, but they get smoked by Georgia, and suddenly that's the narrative. So it's like the Big 12 just can't win in the narrative battle.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Like, I guess what is the perception of the coaches and stuff there? Is it sort of, to me, this is what I would expect it to be, is a lot of tribalism in that, like, this is, you're my buddy here. Like, we are all in this together against the Big Ten, against the SEC, versus being, I imagine 15, 20 years ago, a little bit of a boys club, but also I'm going to hang out with my buddies, versus now it's sort of like, we are all on this bus together, driving to the same destination. Is that sort of what it feels like? Or is it, I guess, has it changed in your time, in your years covering
No,
this?
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Jeff. Like, it's Texas and OU created a lot of imbalances in this conference, right? So, I mean, you could argue that the biggest mistake the Big 12 made was placating to Texas and OU. Like, what happens if they let them go to the Pac-12 years ago? And does A&M and Missouri, do they all stay? What does the conference look like today with like that? Like, man, that is crazy to think about. But the ACC is going through that right now. Like, they basically have their system set up to benefit the programs that want the benefits of it, right? Like Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina want to be treated differently. I think the Big 12 is at an advantage because they are very much unified. And you hear that in messaging, right? Like, Brett Yormark, all the football coaches are in on 5+11. The athletic directors are saying that. Like, in being unified, as Utah's athletic director Mark Harlan walks by, in being unified, like, there's a lot of power in that, because this is a conference that did not have unification amongst its members. They had a lot of issues, right? I mean, Texas and OU created that because they wanted more. They felt like they deserved more, and it eventually drove this conference into where it is today. So that's what the ACC is dealing with right now. So that's why the Big 12 is at a major advantage. They're still obviously below the SEC and the Big 10, and that's significant. I mean, they're getting half as much money in television revenue every year, and that compounds every year. And on top of that, I don't know what the financials are with Iowa State and Kansas State going to Dublin, but did you see the Georgia Florida game? They were getting paid $6.5 million each school by the city of Atlanta to play the game in Atlanta next year. And Jacksonville, the city, is throwing in $1.5 million for them not to play that game on campus. So think about it. I mean, like in terms, their television revenue is so much bigger, and now they're getting paid by cities $7 million, $9 million a year to not play a game somewhere else, so that they'll continue playing the game in Jackson. So it's a lot that we're up against. But I think in terms of the hierarchy, the ACC may have more power at the top because they have a Clemson that's won a national championship, and they, and Florida State, who obviously has a history, and Miami, who has a history. But they're dealing with what the Big 12 dealt with for a long time, which is, hey, we just want to keep you around and keep you happy, so we're going to pay you more money and skew the table in your favor. That creates a lot of contempt among the rest of the members.
Yeah, and how I guess this is a thing. I don't remember if we had talked about this last time, but it feels to me, and especially with the House settlement, so kind of pivot at least a little bit towards the House settlement because we are talking about the ACC. Hey, Grant, thanks for coming.
Look at that handsome lad.
Hair looks great.
I was getting a massage, guys. Sorry, I'm a little late.
So we're talking about, you brought in the ACC, and also we're going to bring in Grant because finally pulled his lazy ass into the actual interview itself.
Lazy, like you put emphasis on that, man. I was getting rubbed down.
We just talked about the ACC.
Non-sexually.
Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about like the House settlement itself, and I think we've mentioned this on here before. It will always be, to me, this kind of at each other, the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, the ACC, the Group of Five, all that kind of stuff. It'll always be at each other because the media rights being negotiated per conference incentivizes actions to be taken per conference. But with the House settlement, one of the things that the House settlement did when the NCAA punted that the concept of the clearinghouse, and what the clearinghouse is, and at least my understanding of this, is that the universities have their budget, whatever, $20.2 million, whatever it is, that $20 million they have to allot to every athlete that's on their roster. Anything above and beyond that has to be approved by a clearinghouse for actual name, image, and likeness purposes. Like, Bill and Joe's Chevrolet is paying someone to advertise you. Here, you're actually doing advertising. Here, you're actually using your likeness to make money. That clearinghouse then just has to approve whatever actions are being taken. Well, the NCAA was supposed to do that, but they punted it down to the conferences. So now the conferences are going to be responsible for running that name, image, and likeness stuff, which means they're shouldering administrative burden. In the past, with it being TV rights negotiated per conference, but the NCAA handles logistics, it didn't make sense for the conferences to think about breaking off and forming their own thing because the NCAA was handling all the logistics of it. At this point, it feels to me like the dam is sort of breaking, or the crack in the wall is sort of widening a little bit, in that there will eventually be, in my opinion, a group of universities with their football program, like the NFL, overseeing just the football program. Now, who's in that club is still up for debate. For my money, I think it only makes sense to have more teams because the SEC, if you stop the western portion of it in Texas and you stop the northern portion of it in Missouri, no one really cares. It becomes NASCAR. It's very regional. No one really pays attention to it outside of that area. And even with the Big Ten, you add the Big Ten in there, you get a little bit of the Northeast, some of the West. So without including the entire swath of the country, you just lose it. So for my money, it feels like down the road that your main four conferences are going to be their own thing. And at that point, so the House settlement sort of opens the crack on that. What has the conversation at this spring conference been about that House settlement and what the implications of it are, if there has been any conversation yet?
There's a lot of confusion. And think about it from a coach's perspective. Some coaches have already cut players from their team thinking that there's a roster limit that's enacted. And so far, like with the House settlement's gone through. Yeah. And it's funny because the judge is basically saying like they're reacting already without the settlement being settled. To me, the clearinghouse is one of the most insane things I've ever heard in my entire life. In what free market is there some sort of algorithm that decides what is and what is not a legitimate, if somebody has a bunch of money and they want to pay a kid to go to their football team and not do anything for that money, that's their prerogative. That's kind of how our society works. That's how capitalism works, right? A lot of good business owners aren't going to chase bad investments, but in college sports, they might. So I have I have no belief that clearinghouse is going to pass the smell test. I think as soon as it rejects a deal, it's going to go to the courts, and the NCAA and this Deloitte clearinghouse is going to take a huge L. I'm not a lawyer, but it just feels like the NCAA and its member institutions, the conferences, still think they're in charge, and they're not. They're not in charge. And ultimately, I think the only way they get this fixed is they have to collectively bargain. And I'm not saying that that's easy. That's insanely difficult. I think what you're describing too long term is exactly what's going to happen. These are going to be, football programs affiliated with the schools. I think you'll be able to, you'll offer packages that could include an education, but might not in terms of what your offer might be to a kid. And then what that looks like at a conference level, I'm not sure. But it's obvious that the Big 12 is fighting for every inch here. And I think we've got the perfect leader at the perfect time to do it. But we're up against a lot. Again, I mean, it's just a huge. You think about 70 million versus 35 million compounding every single year, and that's just one piece of the pie. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, and I completely agree with your point. Like the NBA just can't have the Lakers play the Lakers every day. Right. Major League Baseball can't just have the Yankees play the Yankees. The Cowboys need to play the Jacksonville Jaguars. Individually, I always bring up UTEP, so apologies to Texas El Paso, but like individually, does UTEP matter, quote unquote? No. In the aggregate, though, every UTEP matters. So like that's exactly what you're talking about here. You can't just be the SEC and the Big Ten. You're alienating such a large percentage of the country that's no longer interested in your sport or what you're doing. And so I think like that is something they have to protect against. And again, we're talking about 5 schools here. Like how is Missouri and Illinois, Northwestern and Purdue like a part of these discussions in the same way that we're talking about Michigan, Ohio State? Like they're way closer to what we're doing, and in some cases, obviously, like Iowa State, a way more consistent program, Kansas State, a way more consistent program than most of these SEC and Big Ten schools.
Yeah, it's my thing that I'm going to make it a T-shirt. The transitive property of give a shit is that the reason why I watch Ohio State, Penn State, or whatever is that Ohio State or Penn State might later play BYU or might later play Iowa State, which then impacts my fan base. And right. The reason why I would watch, and this is something that I feel like, so Greg Sankey used in the SEC spring meetings. He said, there's a reason why there's only 30 or 35 teams in any professional league. He was like, yeah, just because that's how much money it takes to create a professional program, Greg. It's different here because right. There's already established rooting interests. Like if you look at the XFL and the UFL, they've tried. It's good football. These are still the better players of college that just missed out, and some of them are going to go to the NFL. You can't just create fan bases. So fandom it's illogical. It's just there. And so if you then say, all right, well, you rooted for Iowa State, but Iowa State's not included in this next thing, but Iowa is. So you got to root for Iowa now because you're in the state of Iowa and you got to root for Iowa. Like, how's that going to go? So it doesn't, if the groups that are like, when you talk about the capitalist society, if this was if they're trying to squeeze the pie and make it smaller, that the smaller number of teams get a bite at the apple, the market will react accordingly. Because what are TV ratings for college football in Pullman and in Corvallis this last year? I imagine if you looked at a case study of Corvallis and Pullman, Washington, they don't care near as much as they did the year before, because the transitive property of give a shit doesn't matter anymore. That my team's not going to be playing your team. We're not a part of this one. So I'm going to go hike on Saturday instead of watching the game. So that happens. If they start to make this too small, then that's going to happen to the UTEPs, to everybody who cares about their program. I'm not going to care. I'm not going to watch Alabama versus LSU. I don't care. It doesn't have anything to do with my team. It becomes the UFL to me. So that to me, it feels like, I don't know, this there isn't necessarily a question in here, but like that to me feels like what the Sankeys of the world are missing is that it's not just this is not a linear thing that you can just claim more money and more money and more money, because the more money you try and claim, the more people you push off the boat, the more the boat starts to sink, because in order for the boat to float, we all need to be on it. Like that to me feels like a thing that he's missing. Again, I don't know if there's a question in there. It's just a thing I had to say.
No, I think you're 100% right. And like, this goes back to like the good of the game piece. And that is like, at the end of the day, like college football, the pomp and circumstance, the towns, the communities, the way they embrace the teams, the traditions, the bands, the tailgating. It's legendary everywhere. Like in Ames, in Manhattan, Lawrence, like, Waco, like legend, Lubbock, like go down the list. All these places that have their own unique traditions and unique things and unique stories. And I mean, obviously Iowa State's the forefront of that, right? I mean, what a story about the name of the stadium. There's so much there. So like when you like really back up for a moment and you really look at that and like, what are the things that we've always loved about college football is the smell of the Saturday and tailgating and having fun with your friends and razzing another team like that. That's what you're losing, like these games going to be played in Santa Clara, California and MetLife Stadium in New York. That's not college football. Alabama, LSU in MetLife Stadium in New York. That's not college football. That's not what we love about the sport. It's not what we got to do it, right? I mean, it's the worst of it, quite frankly.
Ari, I want to ask you this too, and
it was just kind of like waxing poetic, I guess. We were both just playing on.
There's no question. It's just I had to get this out in the air.
Ari, I want to ask you this. I'm not sure if you guys have already talked about this, but the 5+11 model has been tossed out there, where you get the 5 winners of. I mean, there's only Power 4, so I guess are they counting?
It's the highest rated. It's your Boise's. It's your highest rated non-Power 5 conference.
Gotcha. Okay, so. I want to ask your thoughts on that, because obviously Greg Stanky's trying to toss out like the SEC is getting guaranteed 4, Big Ten's getting guaranteed 4. If they did the 5+11, how likely do you think it is that we'll have the 5 best teams in the conference, and then 8 of those other 11 could be SEC, because it's ESPN drives it so much, and we could see a 9-3 Ole Miss get in over. In 11-1 Iowa State, because Ole Miss has losses to Alabama, Georgia, LSU. It's like, well, they play in the SEC, so those losses are better than the one loss that Iowa State has to TCU.
Yeah, I mean, and like those would be 3 good losses. I mean, you throw Vanderbilt in there, like a down Kentucky team too, and it's better though because we say so. I mean, yeah, perception is reality in college football, for better or for worse. The thing we talked about with this earlier, Grant, is I don't know what the better situation is for the Big 12. Because they want to play up, well, let's prove it on the field. But like we've seen that doesn't happen. I mean, Oklahoma State has been snubbed. Like there's literally a playoff because of Oklahoma State getting snubbed.
Sorry,
Baylor snubbed. So
last year they had 4 teams tied atop the conference, where Big 12 easily could have gotten 2 teams in.
How BYU wasn't even a part of the discussion is like a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about Ole Miss missing the playoff or Bama missing the playoff. Like like something bad happened, and it's like BYU beat. We don't have to. I mean, but like they weren't even part of the conversation. It wasn't even a discussion whether or not BYU should. So, if I were to place a bet and say how many playoff teams will the Big 12 get over the next decade in a 5+11 model versus the 4-4-2-2-1. I'm going to bet the Big 12 is going to get more bids in the 4-4-2-2-1, which sucks. Yeah. Which sucks. I also think that is what we're going to get because the SEC is in charge here, and what you're having them talk in circles, and so it like gives them the plausible deniability. Where see the Big Ten say, well, we support the 5+11 model, and we want the SEC to play 9 conference games because we play 9 conference games. But the SEC is not going to play 9 conference games unless they get the 4-4-2-2-1. The whole numbers thing is just so stupid.
That's why I was so surprised that Yormark tossed out like he was in favor of the 5+11, because I'm like, I feel like we could be in the same boat we were just in this last year, where Big 12's getting left out. We only have that one team in.
Yes. I mean, again, I love the idea of proving it on the field. The problem is the Big 12 gets snubbed routinely. It's a perception thing. And the other part to this too, and this is, I think, the best fix for the league, is they need to have more consistency at the top. You just can't have a 3-win team win your conference. And I mean, you could argue they have. Like Iowa State's pretty consistently good. K-State's pretty consistently good. So they're not getting the credit for those teams and brands being as consistently good as they've been. But I mean, I just think you just can't have the parity that this league has had. I think you need, like this year, we need Arizona State and Iowa State and Texas Tech to be good, because otherwise it's another team. And look, I mean, Utah could be that team. I would not be surprised if Utah won the league this year. Okay, well, it's another team that was worst in the league year before and wins the league the next year. And so it's hard because there's no litmus test. So it's like, well, who's good in the conference? Nobody's good, right? If everybody's good, nobody's good. Whereas like if you lose to Georgia or you lose to Bama, like that's a big loss. That's the litmus test for them. And, for better or for worse, Texas and Oklahoma used to be that for the Big 12. I say Texas like good. They were terrible at the last decade.
Yeah.
I mean, Oklahoma, the dominant.
I think too, like obviously Iowa State plays Iowa, and I don't know what other Power 4 teams the rest of the Big 12 plays, but like they got to win those games. Like those are the games that it's like, okay, like we beat Iowa, we beat Ole Miss.
Baylor, Auburn. I mean, you're 100% right. Like, and that's the other thing to this too, guys, is the SEC and the Big Ten are talking about scheduling alliance, right? I mean, they're trying to shut out the other, like they want to keep it in house. So like look towards that too. Like, what does that look like? What opportunities does the Big 12 or the ACC have against, non-conference opponents in the SEC and the Big Ten? Because, it's one thing for them to say that they're good and better than the Big 12 without playing, when we're playing consistently. And there's a good portion of Big 12 SEC games, but it's another thing altogether when they're saying they're better and they're not playing us. And that's what it's moving towards. More of like, well, we're better because we say so. Okay, well, So again, I think your mark is pushing for the 5 plus 11 because the opportunity to get more than 2. But I've just seen enough of this, as we all have, to know over the years that like I bet you the average will be less than 2 over a 10-year period. I bet you'd be 1.5.
I think another thing that's interesting is when you try and be the big man at the table that's pushing all the chips into the table. You shouldn't be playing Tarleton State in November. the fact that no one
they're so good. They're so good. They're so good. Why? Because
the fact that no one like nationally is making fun of this, because honestly, it's a joke at this point. Like if the Big 10 plays 9 conference games, the Big 12 plays 9 conference games, the ACC plays non-conference games, and I'm not saying that this one extra conference game, and what is it? One game? That's not that big of a deal. The difference is that when that non-conference purchased win, your Citadel, your Tarleton State,
Alabama plays Eastern Illinois the second to last week.
It's in November.
Hey, they're
what
a power.
Happens?
Okay.
Hey, the Tony Romos. But
Mike Shanahan, he coached there. Sean Payton. It's cradle of coach.
If you then get to play an additional bye week, you get to sharpen your younger guys, you get to rest your starters, and you still get to make some money on that in November. Well, it's no wonder why teams in the SEC, who are generally deeper because they have more people, also then get to rest themselves in November going into the playoffs, so they do better in the playoffs. That's wild. Turns out it didn't happen this year because they had to play round after round after round. So then the injuries and the equalizing happened all the way, so the better teams actually had to win, which is why the best that the SEC had to offer in Texas barely scraped by Cam Scatterbo. Like that,
It took 4th and 13 for Texas to win.
That non-conference game in November just drives me up a wall that it's not talked about more as comical and as ridiculous. I mean, imagine the Big 12 tournament. Imagine the Big 12 basketball tournament. And in the third round of the Big 12 basketball tournament, Kansas gets to play, I don't know, Mississippi Valley State. Like, imagine if that was the case. That, like, right before the championship game, they get to play Mississippi Valley State versus Iowa State has to then go play Baylor. Like, what world is this okay? That, to me, is the biggest thing that, like, again, if you're going to be the big player and push chips to the table, if you're truly the toughest, be the toughest. If you're truly the best, be the best. Play it. You want to play it on the field? Play it on the field then, Greg.
Totally agree. I mean, look, and are you healthier in a football season when you're playing in August or November?
Yeah. So let's imagine another bye week then.
Yeah, I mean, the grind of 6 days in between playing top level teams every week, like you're 100% right. I mean, you get into a stretch where you're playing Big 12 team on 6 days rest, in some cases less, right? I mean, that's as opposed to, well, we have this game against Ole Miss, but the next week we play Mississippi Valley State, and then we play, Kentucky coming out of that. You're 100% right. So it's like it's a huge disadvantage, certainly for the Big 12. It's a huge disadvantage for the Big 12 to play 9 conference games. Would it hurt the league to play 8 any more than it currently hurts them? You know what I mean? Like they don't seem to get an advantage from it. So why, right? I mean, it's not helping them.
It's interesting. It's interesting to me too that these, like Alabama, they play whoever I said they play. Georgia plays Charlotte. LSU plays Western Kentucky. And it's always the week before the last week where they're playing a rival, so it's a big game. I'll give it to Texas though. I'm looking at Texas's schedule. Their non-conferences: Sam Houston, UTEP, and San Jose State, which cakewalks. But they're playing, those three non-conf. Then they're at Ohio State. So they don't have. Texas doesn't have one of those cakewalks. The week that everyone's playing cakewalk, they're playing Arkansas. So I'll give it to Texas for scheduling Ohio State, but the rest of the SEC, it's a joke.
And I will say though, that's probably I'm kind of disappointed that Iowa State, Kansas State's in Ireland in August, but I think that's a positive of it. You're not playing that game in November in the snow when you're beaten down and anybody can win. And I think the game's going to be huge because it's going to be front and center for everybody. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's Kansas is opening a brand new stadium against Fresno State. I'm going to be locked in on Kansas State, Iowa State, right? Like the whole country is. And I think it will stand out in a way that whoever wins that game will be part of the national consciousness in a way that's really good for the perception.
Like Georgia Tech was last year. Now, Florida State was garbage, but Georgia Tech was on the radar that everyone paid attention to. And I think I'm going to take your point one step further. When you're talking about the kind of the perception of the league, both Iowa State and Kansas State, but more specifically, the winner of that game needs to be 1, 2, 3 in the conference, somewhere in there, because that is, you were mentioning the litmus test. Kansas State is enough of a brand now that you at least consider them tough. You kind of get it. Iowa State's getting there, where if some random college football fan from Tennessee, they're like, this Cyclones, and they're decent. But Kansas State, they had, Colin Klein, they lock into that at least a little bit. If the winner of that game, it goes on to have sort of a 6-7 season or something like that, then it doesn't matter what else happens. The whole Big 12 looks bad. So to me, it feels like the winner of that game needs to be towards the top of the conference, because then everyone measures against that thing because everybody saw that game. They go, oh, wow, that Rocco Beck kid can play. And then you go, all right, well now, oh man, BYU took Iowa State to the wire. BYU must be pretty good. Like it has to be one of those two teams with the front and center. And I wonder if that's why when they were scheduling it, if I imagine Yormark wanted to push that one as hard as he could, because it's rivalry game right away, two teams that you can expect to be good. I wonder if that's a thing. And again, there's your part of the litmus test right away.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I brought that up to Gene Taylor yesterday, the athletic director of K-State, and he was like, yeah, kind of. But basically, like, they were looking at trying to play an international game and thought, like, wouldn't it be cool if we played Iowa State? And Gene was like, no way Chris Kleiman will go for it. I'm not even sure what his thoughts on Jamie and Matt Campbell were, but basically was like, there's no way Chris will go for that. And sure enough, it just kind of happened. But I thought the same thing. Like, I thought it was pushed by the Big 12 because it's cooking the books to a degree, right? Like you're setting yourself up for major success. You're playing a major game in a week where there's not many good games, when you're kicking off the season in Ireland. Like you go back to when they're going to be negotiating their next TV deal, and you're going to say, look at these numbers we pulled, without needing to add the context of, well, it was a week 0 game between these two teams in Ireland. So, but no, I mean, Gene was basically like, no, we were kind of looking at trying to play an international game and wanted to do it, and Iowa State was a willing party. It was basically the way. But it makes too much sense to not also look at the perception piece, and the again, Yormark is trying to do something to where when he goes back to market, he's going to command more dollars for Big 12 media rights, and you're doing that by showing really good ratings. And Iowa State, Kansas State in October, November is just not going to do as good of a rating as it will do on August 23rd when there aren't huge SEC games.
Yeah. Can we, I'm going to pivot real quick from football. Big 12, because basketball coaches were there yesterday, right?
Yeah. Men's and women's basketball coaches. Yep.
Okay. What's the feeling with Big 12 basketball? Like with the coaches, does it feel like, cause the SEC last year, they were really good. Like the SEC was a good conference last year. Can't say they weren't, but also Big 12, pretty damn good. And most of the good teams got better. And what is the feeling of the Big 12 basketball, because that feels like, if you want to have like a little cock of the walk thing, like Big 12 basketball, TJ and Bill Self and Kelvin
BYU's
Sampson.
gonna be nasty.
Like, what is the feeling of Big 12 basketball at the media day or at spring meetings?
First of all, TJ looks great. He's jacked.
Just
When does he
push-ups
ever
all the time. I don't know.
Morning workout in. He's a guy I work with, and he was working out. He was basically like mirroring TJ's workout yesterday morning. I guess TJ came over, like, he was like, "Oh yeah, you're looking pretty good." I love him. He's awesome. So here's what we were talking about in relation to this, Jeff. I could power rank the top 5 teams preseason for the Big 12 next year and not include Kansas.
Yeah,
Wild. Yeah. I mean, Houston's. Let's do that. Just what you're taking. So I got to be Houston 1, but then what?
I mean, and honestly, I don't know where I'd go 2, 3, 4, 5. Other than it's going to be Iowa State, BYU, Texas Tech, and who am I missing? Houston, Texas Tech, BYU, Iowa State, and there's one other obvious. Oh, Arizona.
Yeah.
So, and like, I mean, you can make the case that Kansas probably should be, but I think that says a lot about the conference. I mean, this was a conference that was dominated by Kansas. And then Houston has come in here, and like the analogy I use is they have knocked down the house of Kansas and walked right into our living room and put their feet up on the couch, and like made themselves right at home. I mean, Kansas dominated this conference, and it's like Houston has completely dominated. Houston did something last year that Kansas has never done. Houston did something last year that nobody will ever do again. In 20 Big 12 games, they won 19 of them. Okay? We're never going to see 20 Big 12 basketball games ever again. And I mean, to go 19-1, like I asked Kelvin, isn't this a good league? Why are you so easily? Like, this is supposed to be a good league. So it's Houston's league right now. It's Houston's league.
Yeah, and Uzan coming back only makes that even, I wouldn't say more of a thing, but kind of locks that in even further.
Yeah.
They got to be preseason number 1. I mean, they're loaded. And Ari, to your analogy there, it reminds me of whatever that movie is where the pirates take over the boat and I'm the captain now.
Yes, totally.
That's it.
Bill Self is Tom Hanks, like, huh? I'm used to dominating this league.
Kelvin's the captain now.
I'm the captain. Look at me. I'm the captain now. But I mean, look, it's good for the Big 12, obviously. It sucks for me as a KU fan. And the other thing I'll say about this is, like, you could argue the 20 conference games had diminishing returns, that Iowa State's schedule had diminishing returns last year. I mean, Iowa State and Texas Tech are 2 teams that could win a national championship if they're healthy, but they weren't. And I'm assuming part of that was a ridiculous schedule that they played and playing 20 conference games. So we're not going to see that anymore. They're moving back to 18, which is the right move, because I do think, it's impossible for me to say for sure, obviously. I'm just drawing a straight line with it. There might not be one, but I think there is diminishing returns. Like, you want to have a good resume, but you also don't want to put yourself in a position where your best guys are hurt at the biggest moment of the season. That was the case for Iowa State and Texas Tech.
Yeah, you got 3 guards, 2 of them are hurt, and that's really hard to guard anybody in the Sweet 16, considering everybody then has good guards.
I missed the round robin.
The double round robin of the 10 Big 12 teams.
Yeah, totally, completely agree.
All right, we've already had you for.
The last thing I'll add on that is, like, okay, so there's now 3 common opponents who play twice. Should Kansas and Iowa State play twice every year? Probably. Who else? So, like, then you start thinking about who those 3 should be. Should Kansas play Houston and Iowa State and Kansas State every year? Twice? Probably. So.
Yeah. It's just the basketball thing, and then I'll ask one final question, at least for me. The funny thing with, like, the teams at the top, the conference has got an image that really, I feel like, matches what the geography of the conference is, which is middle of the U.S., kind of, it is a blue collar league. And like that Houston, when you watch a Houston, Texas Tech, or an Iowa State, Houston, or a whatever, one of those top basketball, it feels like a UFC fight where, like, they finish like choking each other out and they got blood coming out of their eyeballs, and then like final bell rings or final thing rings, the judge or the official taps them on the shoulder and they like dap each other up, like, eyes bleeding or whatever. Like, it feels like that is a Big 12 basketball game. And to me, that's one of the reasons why Houston is so easy to root for when they came in to the conference, because they do it the same way that, you're one of us. Like, you came from another city, you moved into our high school, but then you beat up the toughest kid, and then you spit some chew spit right on his ear. Like, all right, cool. Like, we can hang. We're good. Like, that to me feels like the way that Houston did it. So last question I'll have, at least for me, because you got stuff to do at Big 12 Media Days. Do you have any fun that you can share? Because I imagine Big 12 Media Days are a lot of stuff you can't share. Do you have any fun coach or people that we might know interactions at like the swimming pool that you just like ran into somebody and you're like, oh yeah, I saw, whatever. Matt Campbell tosses kids into the pool and whatever, if you got any stories on that that you can air and we can edit this.
I can assure you that is not the case with Matt Campbell, as I'm sure you're well aware. I've been waiting for like some of these coaches are popping it out. I really wanted Matt to pop out and be like, hey, look who it is. It's your players. And but it hasn't happened yet. He's all business, man. He's like the only coach. Like they're in there for hours, 5 hours meeting. So coaches are going in and out, athletic directors. Campbell's all business, man. He's just unrelenting. But no, so last night they had like a plated dinner for the coaches, the administrators. So you kind of had people going in and out where you had basketball coaches in and then they left and then football coaches came in. So like last night was this huge, plated dinner for the coaches in the schools. And so a group of us went and ate by the pool down here at the Waldorf and kind of see this guy like at the distance, kind of like limping. Like, oh, that's Mike Gundy. He's walking this way. He's limping. It's weird. So eventually he makes his way over. And it's like, hey, coach, you doing all right? He's like, yeah, I think I might have just broken my foot on a run. By the way, it's supposed to be at this dinner. We're like, aren't you supposed to go to this dinner? And he's like, yeah, where is it? And we showed him, and he's like, he just walked right up to the bar, sat down at the bar, and that's where he was the rest of the night.
How's the mullet looking?
That is Mike Gundy to a T.
And like, he's so real. It's the guy is a lot of things, but he's somebody that practices what he preaches. Like a guy that works with us here has a son that is an aspiring coach and works as a GA and has worked his way up now and got a different. So he's asking Gundy for advice on that, and Gundy gave him not just like good advice, but like advice that he follows, because this is a guy that's gone and hired Jim Knowles and Mike Yursich from tiny schools to become coordinators. And, he talked about not wanting to hire guys that want to become coordinators and have them be, wanting to be position coaches first. Casey Dunn, he was a wide receivers coach forever before he became the offensive coordinator. Now, obviously he's gone, but so it's not just that he's giving advice or he's talking about things. Like he's the type of guy that is very much practicing the same thing that he's preaching. And I can't remember the exact number. Basically, like in the history of Oklahoma State football, they have like 9, 10-win seasons. And Mike Gundy was the quarterback of the coach for like 8 of those 9. Like he is Oklahoma State football. And he just like, it's weird to me that he's on the hot seat. Like I get it, but at the same time, like that's still crazy because the guy is still an insanely good coach. He's way better, it feels like, when expectations are low. And so we talk about like needing consistency at the top and watch Oklahoma State go and just blow that whole thing on the water this year.
My last 2 questions for you, Ari. First question is, how is Gundy's mullet looking? And second question, excellent. You said nice.
It's lost a little. It's not as deep anymore. He's cutting it a little short now.
That's okay. It's warm, so season's still a few months away. And my second question is, gun to your head, pick the winner of the Big 12 basketball and winner of Big 12 football. Yeah. Guns to your head. You don't got much time.
I'll should I go with my heart and say Kansas in basketball, or go with what history suggests, which is Houston? I'll go with Houston. Yeah, I'll go with that one. That one's like the easy money bet. Football, man. I'm going to come bit like Utah, maybe. So I haven't really thought through who the surprise team's going to be, because there's going to be one. Mm-hmm. And I hope Arizona State wins the league, which I shouldn't say, but I do, because I want consistency at the top. And Dillingham's just amazing. He's awesome. He's the coolest. So I want Arizona State, unless it's Kansas or Iowa State, obviously. But I guess I'll say Utah.
Okay. How's Dion? How's Dion at these meetings?
Who?
Dion?
Coach Prime.
Yeah.
Coach Prime.
You're right.
I don't think he's here.
Ooh.
Not surprised. He's probably shooting Affleck commercials or something.
It's a touchy subject.
Ooh. I didn't know that was a touchy subject. Great question, Grant. Really
Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
things out.
It was kind of a big deal when we found out he wasn't coming. So
Are we able to dive into that, or should we let the lying dogs lie?
nothing that I know beyond like it was a surprise and he should be here. And look, I mean, the league needs him. You know, he's a huge profile. He's a big brand. Like the league needs him. As annoying as it might be to always see him associated with this league and have him be the face, like
He's a face.
He's a face. He's a face that brings a lot of attention. Anywhere he goes, people want to know. And the other part to this is they're on track now after 2 recruiting cycles to be a blue chip ratio team. The Big 12 doesn't have one. So, you know, again, you hope that a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
Or just Iowa State just go win a national championship, buck the whole stupid ratio trend, you know?
There it is. There it is. All right, Ari. Appreciate you. Where can we find you again?
Download the TuneIn app and listen to Big 12 Radio because there aren't many other media outlets that are here. They're not covering us. They're not giving us the love. So, you know, subscribe to Cyclone Fanatic and support all the businesses with Cyclone Fanatic and check out TuneIn. Download the app and search for Big 12 Radio.
Well said, man. We'll do.
Iowa pork. Can I have some Iowa pork for being on the
Can we send Aiden? Can we send him bacon? Just like a nice thick cut bacon.
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
Have your people talk to my people.
Yes.
Right.
Send me some Iowa pork, please.
All right. Thanks, Ari.
We appreciate it. Thank you. All right, and that was Ari Temkin, who, like Jeff mentioned, is down at Big 12 spring meetings. Always good to talk to Ari. He's been a reoccurring guest on the show. Very knowledgeable, just very in tune with what's going on. So I always appreciate the conversation.
Did you in tune? Did you tune in? Did you in tune? Did you mean to do that?
No, I didn't. I'm just a sly guy. You got anything else, Jeff? We'll wrap this up. We're about an hour.
No, senor.
Okay, the last thing I've got, just a reminder that Ames has a new animal shelter coming to Ames. So if you go to cityofames.org, just type in new Ames Animal Shelter Capital Campaign, it's on there. Because as always, I want to remind you, adopt, don't shop. So again, thank you to all of our loyal listeners who are still listening. And again, adopt, don't shop.